Hey, Lions Nation! We're back with another exclusive video bringing you all the latest news about our beloved Detroit Lions. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss anything about the team. Now, let's get into the news. Ford Field lights burned like a runway as the cameras panned across a sea of Honolulu blue, and the place felt less like a stadium than a launch pad waiting for ignition. The stage on the 50 was draped in banners with a single message splashed across them in bold type: speed and touchdowns. Then the doors opened, the hush turned into a rising storm, and the newest star in Detroit walked out in a crisp blue blazer with a silver pocket square that caught the light like a spark. Chris Olave didn't pump a fist or overplay the moment. He just smiled with the kind of quiet electricity that makes a building lean forward at once. And for the next few minutes, it felt like the Lions were unveiling not a receiver, but a brand new gear for their offense. Dan Campbell stood to the side like a proud showman daring the league to blink first. Ben Johnson had the composed look of a chess player who just slid a queen into open space. Jared Goff grinned like a man who can already see the route before the snap and the ball whistling into wide-open daylight. Detroit didn't just add speed. It added intent. A statement that the era of almost is over and the season is going to be played at Olave's cadence. Fast, cleaner than most corners can handle, sharp enough to slice angles into confetti. It took exactly 2 snaps in a brief on-field walkthrough to realize what changes now. On the first, Olave lined up wide right with the easy, coiled posture that has fooled corners since Columbus, hands just loose enough to disguise the suddenness that's coming. At the snap, he gave a feint outside, a ghost of a jab step, and vanished up the seam like a silver streak. No hand fight, no wasted motion, just separation blooming in a heartbeat. The ball arced and dropped, and his feet landed as lightly as a thought. On the second, he aligned in a stack behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, delayed a beat, slipped under the jam, and cut across the field with the kind of glide that looks slow until you notice the safety sprinting and still falling behind. Officially, there were no defenders, but the drill told the truth. Defenses that try to bracket St. Brown or sit on Jameson Williams' go routes are about to be pulled like taffy across the width and depth of the field, and the Lions, who already turned timing and leverage into a weekly clinic, now threatened to become an unsolvable equation on grass. Olave's voice was calm at the podium, the way sprinters talk when they know the gun will sound and their body will do the rest. He spoke about fit and trust, about the way Johnson's playbook uses motion like a question mark the defense can never quite answer, about how Goff's patience is a quarterback's version of hospitality, inviting receivers into open windows, protecting them with ball placement, letting yards after the catch happen without the drama of contested chaos. He talked about St. Brown like a master of the craft, about how the sun god's discipline in the slot forces defenders to stay honest, about how Williams' straight-line terror changes the geometry of a secondary even when he doesn't touch the ball. He said Sam Laporta's stem work is quarterback-friendly art, and he said the offensive line moves like a convoy, the kind of unit that lets deep routes fully ripen instead of dying on the vine at 14 yards. Somewhere in the back, a strength coach whispered that the GPS tags in practice were going to get a workout. Somewhere higher up, an executive thought about January football in Detroit and swallowed a grin. There's a particular sound in this city when hope isn't abstract anymore. It's the punch of drumlines in Eastern Market at sunrise, the rasp of winter wind off the river that can't quite chill a crowd that knows its roster is built for the long months. It's decades of waiting suddenly collapsing into the immediate now. When Campbell stepped back to the mic, he didn't bother with timid language. He said the Lions brought Olave here because he springs traps out of nothing. He said defenses don't have enough human beings to cover what Detroit is going to align in motion and disguise as run. He said the league can try to add speed to the field, but Detroit just added speed to the playbook. You can't coach fear out of a defense, he said, eyes bright. You can only give them reasons to feel it. We plan to give them a lot of reasons. The first practice with the full offense made plain how the playbook expands by implication. Motion is no longer just an identification tool. It's a weaponized misdirection. Jet look from Williams pulling a nickel 2 steps, St. Brown orbiting behind the formation to create leverage for a glance route, Laporta's short motion collapsing a split safety look, And then OLAVE pressing a dig at 12 that becomes a dagger at 18 because he sells it like gospel and turns it heretical at the last second. Johnson has always loved mirroring concepts, twins to the boundary that tell one story while the field side whispers another. But OLAVE gives him a way to tell both stories at once. You can call a Yankee with stacked speed and force a safety to decide between post and over. You can call slot fades against quarters and win against leverage instead of talent. You can call choice routes that end up humiliating linebackers who thought they'd seen everything a slot can do. Every coverage shell now has a what-if hardwired into it, and defensive coordinators, even the stubborn ones, don't sleep well when that happens. Goff, who has faced every version of skeptical analysis a quarterback can endure, looked as loose as he's ever looked in 7-on-7. The ball came out early, on time, late by design, and OLAVE's understanding of pacing made it look easy. He throttled down between zones with the same elegance he hits the accelerator against man. He set up his brakes like a magician palming a coin. Sell the eyes, hide the intention, reveal the truth after the defender commits. On a deep comeback, he tracked the corner's hips instead of the ball, sold the vertical, snapped back with a cut so skinny it left no breadcrumbs, and then, with hands like soft snares, plucked the throw as if tethered to it by invisible wire. Goff doesn't have to throw hero balls when a receiver understands timing at this level. The heroism becomes mundane, the extraordinary normalized, and that's precisely how offenses stack first downs until defenses start gambling and the shot plays go off like fireworks. In the locker room, St. Brown welcomed OLAVE like a fellow craftsman, promising that Detroit would remain a place where details matter more than headlines. Williams laughed with him in the corner about who would pull the safety first, then jogged out to run sprints for no reason other than joy. Laporta spent 5 minutes asking him about how he sells a slant without tipping his chin, that tiny tell that betrays so many receivers. Offensive linemen nodded quietly, because they are professional skeptics who become believers only when they can hear a drive being strangled by exhaustion down the stretch, and OLAVE's presence sounds like that. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs conferred with Johnson about screen variations that use OLAVE's motion as window dressing that isn't decorative at all. It's a symphony, but not the delicate kind. It's a brass-heavy thing that swallows the air and makes your ribs hum. Around the league, the calculus in the NFC North shifted as soon as the news hit ticker speed. The Packers, who live for pattern match integrity, know OLAVE's route deception will turn their rules into riddles. The Bears, building young and mean on defense, recognize that a single false step against him becomes a photograph you don't want in film review. The Vikings, schooled in spacing and rhythm themselves, understand the burden of defending an offense that can stretch you vertically and horizontally while maintaining run credibility with a line that moves grizzly bears off their spot. Detroit already believed it could win the division with pragmatism. Now it can aim for the 1 seed with dynamism. Schedule makers who thought they had calibrated the primetime slate are rethinking which cold Sunday nights deserve a national audience. Because few things are as marketable as a ball tearing through cold air into a streaking receiver's hands and a crowd sounding like jet engines. OLAVE's film from the last few years is a catalog of micro-freedoms, a shoulder square here, a knee angle there, a nod of the head disguised as balance correction, that all add up to yards that weren't there for others. Detroit's analytics staff, never showy, simply slid a packet to Ben Johnson with heat maps that look like spilled paint across the deep right and intermediate middle. You can see where he lives, in the voids between linebacker depth and safety patience, in the slivers of grass where cornerbacks think the sideline is their friend until a toe tap robs them of certainty. You can see the zones where Detroit barely attacked a season ago because the leverage calculus didn't quite favor the throw. Now those zones are fair game. When you add his pristine catch radius, more geometry than wingspan, and his knack for turning a dead play into 6 hidden yards by slipping the first tackle with body control more than brute force, the offense becomes not just explosive, but ruthlessly efficient. Explosiveness wins highlights, efficiency wins seasons. Training camp crowds will learn the pattern of it. The first deep shot will stretch the lungs of the corner. The second will stretch the pride. The third will not come, because Johnson will ride the threat like a thoroughbred and call 3 straight plays that look like passes until the run hits the crease at full sprint. OLAVE is the kind of player who creates rushing lanes 3 plays in the future. Safeties who widen with him leave cutback alleys that look like interstate ramps. Nickel corners who cheat toward him on jet motion leave bubbles that Gibbs can exploit without being touched until 6 yards past the line. The same motion that opens a seam for Laporta is the motion that generates a soft edge for Montgomery. This is the hidden value of true field tilting speed. It buys time and space for teammates who would have been excellent anyway. In Detroit, excellence will have better lighting. But it's not only speed that arrives. It's the way OLAVE lands his footwork like punctuation marks in a sentence that always makes grammatical sense. Some receivers run like exclamation points and some like ellipses. He runs like a comma, a pause at exactly the right moment that allows everything after it to make perfect sense. On 3rd and 7, that comma appears at the top of an out route. Press vertical, pause, decelerate without a shoulder pop, extend the inside hand to declare a landmark, and catch before the DB even finishes transferring weight. On 1st and 10, the comma is an inside shimmy that causes a quarter safety to shade wrong, opening the glance behind a linebacker who never sees the ball fly. On 2nd and 2, it's a lazy sell of a bubble that turns into a slant and go the corner will swear was offensive pass interference because human bodies shouldn't be able to re-accelerate like that. Teams will challenge because pride demands it, but the tape always tells the truth. Detroit's defense will feel the energy, too, because iron sharpens iron in these buildings, and competition is the only way talent evolves into inevitability. Cornerbacks who measured their practice reps against St. Brown's precision and Williams' raw burn now also have to deal with a receiver who makes every rep a test of restraint. Break too soon and he's behind you. Hesitate and he'll eat your cushion like a hungry tide. Safeties will study the angle tree that OLAVE forces on pursuit and understand that a wrong step gives up not just yards but morale. Practice picks up because pride doesn't like being embarrassed, and Campbell, who thrives on good-natured ferocity, will feed the room with it. The effect bleeds into Sundays. If you train all week against speed that carries menace, game day speed becomes familiar rather than frightening. Before we move on, take a second to drop a like and subscribe. That way, you'll stay up to date with every exclusive Lions update, and you'll even have a chance to win an official Detroit Lions jersey. Let's keep going. There's a cultural synergy here that makes football sense look like city sense. Detroit responds to authenticity and to work that looks like work. OLAVE's brand of excellence is neat and unauditioned. He doesn't make corners look bad to make himself look good. He just makes them late. The difference matters in locker rooms. Veterans respect the small charity of receivers who protect their quarterback with decisive routes. Coaches love players who turn install meetings into on-field translation without needing a week of rehearsal. Equipment guys notice the receiver who double-checks his studs before a wet practice so he doesn't slip and waste a rep. Fans recognize the body language of a player who wants the ball but doesn't sulk when it goes elsewhere because a teammate is drawing a softer matchup. In the long run, those habits become the tide that lifts a season from good to unforgettable. When the schedule turns mean, when December rolls cold and the NFC's old powers try to drag games into the mud, this is the kind of addition that keeps everything on schedule. Third downs shrink when the ball is delivered on the plant and not a blink later. Red zone snaps multiply in value when a receiver can win on a speed out without the push and shove that draws flags. 2-minute drills become a memory palace for Goff, each shelf labeled with a different version of leverage that OLAVE knows how to conquer. There will be a night at Lambeau when breath hangs in the air like smoke and the field is a crust of frost, and the game seems destined to be decided by a bounce. That's when speed that converts cleanly to control decides it instead. A post against single high, a corner route throttled perfectly against two trail, a quick hitter that turns into 40 because the tackle angle was optimistic. These are the plays that flip seeding and force the playoffs to run through Detroit, where the roof lexicon holds noise like a drum. Nothing about this is hypothetical inside Allen Park. The play sheets are being rewritten in coffee-scented rooms. The staffer who tracks defensive substitutions is already listing the nickel and dime looks opponent's favor when faced with two vertical threats on the same side. Johnson is designing answers that don't just punish those looks, but make them feel like traps the defense set for itself. Consider a 3-by-1 with St. Brown as the point man in a bunch, Williams as the Z to the field, and OLAVE as the lone X to the boundary. If the defense rotates the safety toward the bunch, Johnson will give OLAVE a glance with a built-in alert to spin it vertical if the corner tries to squat. If they roll the other way, the bunch becomes a pick-your-poison of option routes, and OLAVE's backside dig arrives just as the mic drifts one step too far from the hash. Swap it. Put OLAVE in motion to create inside leverage for a slot fade, then orbit him back and snap before the defense realigns. It's not gadget football. It's conventional football called at a tempo that turns ordinary into unfair. Special teams will steal a few possessions because of the field position dividend this kind of offense pays. Teams punting to Detroit will start aiming for coffin corners and miss more often, giving short fields. Teams kicking off after field goals will get greedy, trying to pin the ball near the sideline. And one day a return will crack up the middle because the coverage unit cheated left to deny the boundary. Hidden yards pile up like found money, and in a league where margins are razor thin, found money turns into wins. That has always been the thing about speed. It doesn't only show up on highlight reels. It changes decisions in small, cumulative ways until a season looks different on paper than anyone predicted in August. Off the field, there's the anchor of identity that comes when a city and a player make sense together. OLAVE talked about food, how Detroit's spice profile is underrated and how the best taco trucks in this town would play just fine on the West Coast. He laughed about the cold and said fast is fast in any weather if your feet are under you. He said he's already watched clips of Barry Sanders late at night because greatness here has a certain shape, the kind that breaks angles and logic, and he wanted to soak in the posture of the place. He promised youth camps in the summer and visits to schools during the season with an earnestness that felt less like PR and more like rhythm. If you spend enough time around teams, you know when a star is performing the role and when he's just being. OLAVE looked like a man who understands that the best way to become a legend in Detroit is to be relentless and luminous at the same time. Hard truths wait, of course, because the league always answers back. There will be Sundays when a defensive front wins the line and forces the ball out early, when jam technique at the line is legal enough to disrupt timing, when wind turns deep outs into coin flips. That's where his route density matters, the way he can cut a plan B and plan C into the stem without telegraphing the pivot. Press him, and he stacks cleanly. Trail him, and he finds his quarterback's eyes and returns downhill into the teeth of leverage for a safe, unfussy completion. Rotate coverage to his side, and he becomes the decoy with altruistic violence, carrying two defenders as if they were his problem to solve for the collective. He's the kind of receiver who makes a punt a smart play when the call dictates patience, because he'll make it pay later when the defense relaxes. Teams that live on volatility hate it when your star is both explosive and patient. Detroit just acquired that paradox. It's not lost on anyone that the Lions have been waiting for a year like this since before smartphones. That Ford Field has felt the tremor of resurgence and wants the earth itself to move this time. That's why the phrases you heard around the building all afternoon felt like they belonged to a January script. Complementary, sustainable, multiple, punishing. Not sexy words, but championship words. And then you add the sexy on top. OLAVE's acceleration through the catch point. The way defenders' arms swipe where he used to be, the crowd gasp that accompanies a ball throttling toward the post with him already 3 yards clear, and you realize Detroit isn't choosing between styles. It's taking both. On some Sundays, this offense will look like an axe. On others, it will look like a laser. Opponents don't get to pick which they prefer. Across town, muralists were already sketching lines on brick. Kids in backyard 2-minute drills were shifting their imaginary safeties because they'd seen what happens if you leave a seam open. At a bar on Michigan Avenue, an old fan who'd lived through everything from rebuilds to renaissances leaned back and said that this one feels different because it's the first time in ages the city can picture the shape of how a title might actually be won. Not a miracle run, not a chaos bracket. A team that dictates terms from September to January because its identity is clear. It will meet you at the line with muscle and stretch you beyond your breath with speed. And now the speed has a face that barely even seems to sweat when he's running 40 yards as if on a moving walkway. When the cameras finally clicked off and the microphones went dark, OLAVE stayed a moment longer on the field, Just a man and the lines and the sound of faraway maintenance crews rearranging chairs. They'll set out again in the morning. He traced a path from the right numbers to the left hash, as if feeling the angles already, as if rehearsing the geometry of Sundays yet to come. A staffer tossed him a ball, and he snapped it out of the air without looking, one-handed, in that casual way that makes catches look like reflexes instead of rehearsed excellence. Then he jogged toward the tunnel, and each stride looked the same as the last, methodical, balanced, coiled, inevitable. The calendar will turn to week 1 soon enough. The league will circulate cut-ups of Detroit's new formations and send interns into bunker rooms to chart route combos and motion tags. None of it will prepare anyone for the moment the ball is snapped and the angle is wrong by a yard, and the yard becomes 6, and the 6 becomes a drive, and the drive becomes a game slipping out of reach. That is what speed does when it is married to craft. It doesn't just outrun you. It convinces you to choose wrong before the race even starts. Detroit has chosen right. The city knows it. The division suspects it. The conference will learn it. And on cold nights that turn breath into ghosts, when the noise folds down from the roof and the lights feel close enough to grab, there will be a snap when Goff plants, when OLAVE is already even with the defender who knows even means leaving, when the safety flinches towards St. Brown because he has to, and when the ball arcs into that wide open space where the future lies. Speed and touchdowns, yes. But more than that, a plan finally moving at the pace it deserves, a team finally shaped to the contours of its ambition, a city finally seeing what it looks like when everything that used to be almost turns into a scoreboard that tells a different story. We bring you the latest Lions news every single day. So make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. And of course, drop a comment below with your thoughts on today's news. Your voice makes a difference for Lions Nation. See you in the next video.